praise to our Lord and Saviour, Jesus Christ. Amen. Hello, I am sharing a meditation technique that is like very, very useful. Um, um, it's a devotional meditation technique for cultivating that love for Jesus and for also purifying the mind and purifying the heart. And it's relatively simple. It's quite a simple meditation. So it's not going to be too hard to explain, but I will just give like a few other like side points, and some of it may seem a little bit weird, like if you're used to mostly Christian stuff, you might think, oh, maybe it seems a little bit outside the box, but and it is coming from also Eastern sources, but sort of when you hear what the meditation is, I think you understand it's not really within like any particular religion. Um, um, and yeah, it's basically about devotion. I mean, you might already be doing something like this. If you do prayer or something, then you kind of probably are, but it helps to have it clarified. I know I was doing like a type of devotional practice, and I was practicing elements of this style of meditation, but without really consciously realizing. And I think after learning about it, it makes it more effective because you kind of have more awareness of what you're doing. So, yeah, yeah, some of the, yeah, yeah. So basically, it's a pretty simple meditation. You can combine it with other forms, um, and all you have to do is, um, well, it's like to understand. It's understood that God is omnipresent, so He is everywhere. So what this is not like a trick, but like a factual reality. What you can do is visualize in your mind that God or like Jesus, imagine that Jesus is standing right before you, um, maybe like full size, or you can imagine him smaller. But the idea is that that is actually true. If you visualize and you feel that he really is there, that is true because God is everywhere. So in that space, whether you're doing it with your eyes open and you visualize him in that space, or if you have your eyes closed, like he is also in your mind, like because the mind is like a type of substance, and God is omnipresent. Obviously, he's everything, so he's also your mind. So you can visualize God or Jesus Christ like in your mind in front of you, and that's true. He is really there, and that's basically the meditation. But there is a difficulty to that, like maybe it's sort of in the faith of I guess. So yeah, there's different things. I'll explain that there's other things that you can do while you do this, but for instance, you can just do it by itself. So you just sit like on the floor or in a chair and close your eyes, and then you visualize Jesus standing in front of you and know that he is actually there. And then what emerges is a type of relationship. So this is what I was talking about. It's coming more from the Eastern influence because it's not, it exists in Christianity, but it's not so clearly defined. The thing is, in these Vedic like devotional sources, they have it as science. They kind of call it the science of bhakti or devotion, and they've actually identified five primary types of relationship feelings, which they're called rasas. Um, in that system, it's called a rasa, but basically it means there's five primary different ways that you can relate to God, and this is outside of just the idea of awe and reverence, because we might have awe and reverence for God because He is great and He knows everything and He's very like everything and overwhelming. So in that sense, you're kind of just like, oh God, like, I'm just nothing, and like, um, but there's sort of like a type of like uneasiness to that, and um, in actuality, well, we'll say Jesus doesn't so much um, appreciate um, that type of relationship, to just be so careful around him all the time and not really. Well, I'll explain. Like, these are the other types. Once you get over the idea of the godliness of Jesus, the sort of, oh, be careful, this is holy sort of thing, if you can just forget that for a moment, knowing that He is still Jesus and that He is divine, but sort of just forget about it for a little while, and then just let Him be there and how you naturally relate to Him. There's these kind of five different ways that you'll relate, and once you know them, you kind of have a bit of choice as well. You're sort of working with what's natural, but you can kind of choose, sort of. I'll explain them, and they kind of go in a like an ascending order, meaning the first one is just what it is, whereas the second one includes that type of feeling relationship and also the one before it. But I'll explain. So the first one is servant, a feeling of being a servant of God or a servant of Jesus, which is obviously just that feeling of, oh, I want to, what can I do? See, it needs to be understood that these are different from the factual realization, because in a factual sense we are all servants of God, and that's an established fact. And in another sense, we're all children of God, so you could say He is our Father. Yet this is it's a feeling that you get when you're actually relating to Jesus Himself, and not when you've kind of forgotten, sort of to some extent, that godliness or the factual kind of matter of fact realities of those types of relationship, like being a son of God or a daughter, and also being a servant. So this feeling is actually the feeling of being a servant. The next one up, if I've got this right, I think, is neutrality, which is sort of like, it's a kind of like, I'm just where I am, and you're where we are, and we're just sort of being together. We're not. It's just neutral. it's like it's pleasurable. It's like a pleasurable kind of situation, enjoying each other's presence, but not necessarily some kind of distinct relationship. Um, well, that is the relationship. The relationship is neutrality, so it's just neutral. Um, the next one up is being a friend. So that's to feel as being a friend with God, which sort of opens up to maybe being a bit joking or like a little bit like kind of relaxed, just like a friend. Um, I mean, obviously, these relationships we have some idea from the material versions of them, which we experience in real life, but they're actually quite different from the spiritual version of that same relationship. When it's in relation to God, it's actually a spiritual relationship, so it has a different quality. It's actually, yeah, it spiritualizes, and it has a positive, um yeah, it's yeah. So anyway, it's like friendship with God, which is quite relaxed. And the next one, um, which may sound strange if you're thinking of that we're all children of God, but remembering that's like an established fact, but that this is the actual feeling of the relationship, um, that is to feel like a parent of God, or a parent of Jesus, like Mother Mary was. And so that's kind of like, it sounds strange, but it's like a feeling of nurturing or something like that. Like you kind of a little bit concerned for his welfare. You kind of you wanna you wanna cradle him, or you want to just like make sure everything's all right, and you kind of just wanna, yeah. So and these are all in ascending things. If you can kind of get a feel for the way that that kind of the closeness of the relationship increases as it goes up. And what I was sort of explaining earlier is that with one, like say neutrality, that also includes the feeling of being a servant, and with friendship, that includes the feeling of neutrality and also being a servant, and then a friend, and so on. Like, and so the last one, or what's considered the topmost way feeling relationship, or otherwise known as rasa, what is the topmost is the conjugal relationship, which is as between a partner, between a male and female, that kind of intimacy, that level of intimacy with God or Jesus himself. Um, and again, they're not to be confused with the material version, yet there is a kind of similarity to it. It's kind of like if you're like in that conjugal, like you might feel like, oh, I just love you so much, you mean so much for me, or you might like write love poetry or something like that, it's like that's that nature of relationship. Um, so how this relates is these are the different ways that there's also like another 10 subcategories of these rasas, which I won't go into, but out of these five primary ones, like um, you relate when you do this meditation, and when you know that factually there is Jesus right before me, I'm visualizing him, I see that he's there, and I know that he is actually there. The only thing that exists then is that relationship. Well, we'll get into what else does exist, the movements of the mind and stuff. Um, but before that, yeah, I'll just talk about other things that you can do to supplement, or other additional things that you do while you do this type of meditation. So in the East, this type of meditation is called Roop Dhyan, which is Roop and then Dhyana. So Roop Dhyan. And I learnt about this through Kripalji Maharaj and his website. Um, so um, this is it, just talked about more in the Christian context. I think you can understand to some extent that it's not something that belongs to a particular religion, because the actuality of God being with you, like, how can you really say that's to in any particular religion? I mean, maybe I don't need to stress this point too much, but you might already be doing this in terms of prayer, like when praying to the Lord. I mean, you do feel that you are talking to the Lord, um, although I think sometimes people can still think, and like I've thought like this as well when I've done things, this kind of feeling like God's really far off or something, like he's in his distant heaven and I'm just sort of praying to him, I'm calling out, and maybe I'm hoping he'll hear me, like, you know, God, please hear my prayer, like, um, when, uh, like, there is, in some way, there is a sense, because he does have a home, but he is everywhere, he's omnipresent, so he's all around us, he's everywhere, he's everything, and he's in our heart as well. Um, so, um, yeah, so you can combine it like with prayer, when you pray to the Lord, however you do that, like, and again, that will be to do with your type of relationship with Him, will be, I guess, the style of prayer that you do. Um, but what helps is, or what's really best, like what makes it real, is when you combine this Rup Dhyan meditation, when you combine the actual feeling, knowing that God is right before you, that there He is, and this is me, like, relating to Him, like, um, then when you pray, you're not praying to like an absent God. You know, He's invisible, but He's not absent. He's present. Um, Especially in the now, like in the moment. Um, so he's right before us, when we pray, and that's see, combining the meditation with the prayer. Other things you can do is like, if you sing devotional songs or something like that, um, yeah, then you just do the same thing. You sing the song, but all the time have that picture in your mind of Jesus and know that He's actually there, and then you just play to Him, um, or for Him, or in relation to, expressing those feelings that you feel in that relationship, um, with Him. Also, with the imagination thing, like, it's not so important how well you visualize Jesus. Like, the main thing is just knowing that He's there and getting that general. It might be a very clear image. It sort of depends, but it doesn't matter. It's like the main thing is that you know that He's there, and sort of if you can visualize Him in His person, as personally there, like that helps, because His form is important as well. Yeah, because that's personal. Seeing the person Jesus there allows us that, knowing, well, He's a person, I'm a person. We can relate as people, and see, it's all about that relationship and the personal connection. For devotion, I mean, um, like I titled this video, it's devotional meditation. Another thing that you can do, which may be a little bit different to what you've heard, but I've actually done a video in the past on chanting, and I do the chanting in the Christian context by chanting Jesus' name. And for this, like, I just mention it because I find it really good, and you might like to try it. And it goes perfect with the with this type of meditation. So it's basically the repetition of God's name, or the repetition of Jesus' name in Aramaic, which is, I just do it in Aramaic because it has less connotations, and also if someone else hears me doing it, they're not quite so surprised. I don't know, there's just, I think a lot of people, especially because I think when we've heard the name sort of said in inappropriate circumstances too many times, it also has an effect. So I say his name in Aramaic when I chant it, which is Ishua Mashika. Ishua Mashika. So Mashika is means Messiah, and Ishua is Jesus, and so Messiah was translated to Christ, so it was Jesus Christ. So Ishua Mashika, and to do the chanting, like, it helps to have beads as well, which, like, you can get rosary beads and use them, or you can get the beads from like crystal stores or the Hare Krishnas who do chanting. Like, chanting is otherwise known as japa. That's a very well known form of meditation. It's sort of like between meditation in the strict sense of emptying the mind and between prayer. Sort of chanting is there, which is repetition of the names, or like mantras. There was a saint who said God's name is a mantra, and see, that's true, because all of his names, like Jesus' name, is what's called transcendental, which means it's like it's spiritual. So when you say it, like, it puts you in contact, whereas also the meditation does. I mean, but it just really works as an entire practice if you you get some beads or make some beads or something, and and you just repeat the name Yeshua Mashika, and whilst knowing that he's there and visualizing him being there, and that works really well, because it although you can just do it on its own, having that extra element of like singing or prayer or something like that, or it gives that mode of expression, which allows, I don't know, just like a feeling of expression. So yeah. So I thought I'd talk about what are called ecstatic symptoms as well, which is, if you do this and you take it up as a practice, after a while you may experience these things, and maybe wonder what's happening, or it just helps to sort of know that there are these different type of symptoms that can arise from by doing the meditation, and they're good signs. They're signs of progress, I guess. But yeah, there are these different things. So one of them is crying. So and crying's very good. Crying for God is very good. And sometimes that will just spontaneously happen while you're meditating in this way, or if you're chanting or singing, these tears will just start coming. Another one is perspiring, which, like, you might just suddenly start sweating quite a lot, and Another one is shaking, where the body begins to shake. And I hope that none of this is worrying you or anything. It's just it's all very, it's nice when it happens. Um, Shaking. There's other ones like being stopped as though dumb, um, and there's some more extreme ones like rolling on the ground or something like that. There's laughing as well. You might just start laughing. Um, um, you see these things sometimes at the laying on of hands and stuff like that when people give the Holy Spirit. Sometimes these symptoms arise, but yeah, it's the same sort of thing. Um, so yeah, so they're the symptoms that can arise. And yeah, so I guess the other thing, obviously, you're dealing with your mind when you do the meditation. So um, sort of the other essential part of the meditation that I haven't explained is the process of continually bringing the mind back to that visualization, to that realization that God is present, and to that relationship that you're experiencing with Him, that feeling. The mind just comes up with all these different things that it wants to think about, and your job is to gently bring the mind back to the subject of your meditation, back to that, back to Jesus, and just always bring yourself back to Him. Ultimately, you want Him to just, to Him alone and nothing else. So that's sort of the feeling is, like it was described as hopelessness, which is sort of like you have no hope that anything else in the world is going to work, or nothing else will actually fulfill that void, or fulfill that everything that only He can. So so it's like no hope in anything else. There's nothing, only Him. So that's sort of the spirit. And it was also explained that that the mind thinks about different things because ultimately it kind of still has some kind of attachment to something else. It seems it still believes that there is some kind of happiness in something else other than God Himself, the source of all joy. So it still has that false belief that there's something else, and this is kind of the idea of relinquishing our attachments, and which works with God. The more we attach to God, the more we attach to Jesus, the less attached we are to the world and to ourselves in terms of self-love. Like the less attached to selfishness and the less attached to worldly desires we are, the more that we are in love to Jesus and to heaven. So that's the idea, that by experiencing His presence, we become more and more attached to Him, and that love grows in our heart, and that will guide us towards Him, and bring us closer to Him. And also it will purify our mind and purify our heart, so that He can reside within us. Yeah, so this kind of works. I'm making some videos on the Ten Commandments at the moment, and really this is the first commandment, which is to have no other gods before me. So what that actually means is another god is anything that you love above all else, right? Whatever you love above all else is a god to you. So, and that can be anything. Like, the other gods are just the thing that isn't God himself. Because really, he should be the thing that he should be the one. It should be him that you love above all else. And so no other gods before me means no other attachment to, you don't love, well, you kind of don't love anything else. I mean, it sounds a little bit funny, but you're not attached to anything else. It's really only him. He's the purpose of your life, and he's the everything. And so I'm mentioning this in relation to the mind because it fits in well. I mean, we have this first commandment, and it is actually a guiding principle which can help us in our meditation practice. Knowing that to not have any gods before him means to not have anything else. There's nothing else worth thinking of. There's nothing else, you know. I'm not saying you won't like use your mind or whatever, like in practical purposes, like, but when you're doing this meditation, there's nothing. The whole purpose is to focus on just him, and yeah. So, and that's doing that first commandment. You know, that takes you right through, because I think even to the extent, even if you don't love something else, I think any other love, like, it's kind of like you don't want any gods before him. You don't want anything else. You just want him alone. I think you get the idea anyway. But that was just the main thing that I wanted to end on. And yeah, so so that's essentially what it is. You can just visualize Jesus standing before you, and then it's just all in that relationship. And you know, you do it for a set time, like say half an hour or something like that, or whatever you feel that you're capable of. You just set that time aside and try and do it every day, because like meditation is a cumulative thing. It needs to be done like every day for a long period of time. It's not like a quick fix kind of thing. Although, you know, it's not like, yeah. So um, it's a long thing, and but don't let that put you off. I mean, it's wonderful, and there are instant benefits from it. Like, you'll feel more peaceful and stuff like that. It all depends, you know. I mean, ultimately, you're looking at attaining that the purpose of life, and that bliss, which is Jesus, that love, realizing that love for him. Yeah, and yeah, so um, God bless.